minimum wage as living wage because this wage includes several dimensions. For example, the amount incurred on food, on clothing, housing, fuel expenses.
Places where workers already have very high bargaining power. In those places, if you increase wages beyond what is there, that will lead to lower employment.
Right.
The idea of giving a living wage to workers, if it is arrived at reasonably, I think is a good one. So, sometimes if there is a shock, then these wages remain rigid, then there is a problem. Welcome to another episode of Finterpret, a podcast series based on academic papers brought to you by Center for Analytical Finance at Indian School of Business. This is Prasanna Tantri. I teach finance at ISB. With me, Raja continues to be there. He's a PhD student at ISB and also has published a paper on labor laws in the Journal of Development Economics. So, and we are talking about labor laws. Raja, we spoke about labor laws last time.
Right.
So let me, for the benefit of viewers, let me quickly summarize what we did last time. And the whole point was, we are looking at a 100-day agenda for the new government, whichever government comes to power. And there are certain things we think will be good for growth because all parties are giving guarantees. And one of the guarantees will be like third largest economy and so on and so forth. So one necessary reform we think is this labor laws. And there's already a law which is ready-made, and all that is required is implementation.
Right.
And we explained what labor law is, and you explained on different dimensions. Again, we are not lawyers. We might not have read even a single law fully. We are looking from a finance angle.
Right.
And you said three aspects of labor laws.
Right.
What was those three aspects?
So first is employment aspect,
Right.
and second is collective relations, that is between unions and management,
Right.
and third is social security.
Okay, so when we talk about change in labor laws, we are looking at change in these three
Dimensions.
dimensions, right?
Yes.
And where these three dimensions on paper are loaded in favor of employees, they are like pro-worker.
Pro-worker.
Although result may be something else, at least on paper it looks like it's in favor of employees.
Right.
And where it is not, or favor of employers, it is pro-employer. That is
Right.
how it is classified.
Right.
And you spoke about one paper which is published in the QJE. Do you remember the name of the authors?
It's by Botero et al.
Yeah.
In QJE 2004.
Quarterly
It was
Journal of
published
Economics.
yes,
And that paper looked at 85 countries
85 countries.
and showed that countries which have so-called pro-worker labor laws, they had lower employment.
Lower employment
Yeah.
and larger unofficial economy.
Yeah, so people, in the name of protecting workers, what these laws did, it pushed them into unorganized sector where no law applies.
Right.
From a stringent labor law. So what it resulted, and correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of a two separate sections. One category of workers protected by laws, a very small portion. Majority totally outside, where even basic laws don't apply.
Right.
Because we discussed in an informal setup, you can just fire the guy and say, don't come from tomorrow.
Right.
That is one. Then we said, you also spoke about Burgess and Besley paper. So what was the finding there?
Yeah, and that paper is focused on India. So states which were in favor of workers, that is with the stringent labor laws, in those states again the employment was lower, the productivity was lower, the manufacturing growth was lower.
Right. So same finding, but
Yes.
within the, and you explained, this explains why India did not have a significant growth in manufacturing in the early 2000s.
Yes.
This is their key takeaway.
Right.
So in sum, the point is, what appears to be in favor of workers is actually anti-worker. It doesn't help the workers. If you want to generate more employment, you have to liberalize. You do not have entry without exit.
Right.
If you tell, and we discussed, Indian laws require you to take government permission to fire some workers.
Right.
Again, fire means remove.
Right.
And shut down factories.
Yes.
So if you don't let entrepreneurs to shut down factories when they're losing money, they will not enter.
Right.
This
Even
is something these people don't understand, right? Is that
closing is also costly.
Yeah, closing is also costly. So this is what we discussed.
Right.
And finally, you said it is also important to communicate. We discussed one paper there also. This is where we ended.
Yes.
So let's look at another aspect of the labor law, which is now lying in almirahs,
Yeah.
and hopefully which will be implemented. This is about minimum wages. So a lot of people, public opinion, in fact, when you look at those commentators, looking at their Twitter, you can sort of, you can find out what this person's opinion on any aspect is going to be. Because most of the commentary is ideology based.
Right.
Right? The people who like what we said, in the last episode are unlikely to like what we're going to say today, right? So because the second thing about this labor law, one of these laws, is providing living wages. You know, it is going to enforce sort of minimum wages. Can you explain what does the law say?
Yes. So law touches upon various aspects. They call it as minimum wage as living wage because this wage includes several dimensions. For example, the amount incurred on food, on clothing, housing, fuel expenses. Since they deal with day-to-day living expenses, it is coined as living wage, but broadly it is minimum wage.
So basically it will compel firms to pay a certain amount of money. If I have to hire anyone, I have to pay this much.
Minimum that much.
I cannot pay less than this. And paying less than that is going to be illegal.
Right.
That is what this law is going to be. So that's why I said you can actually go and test. Most people who are likely to like what we said in the last episode are likely to dislike what we're going to say today, because isn't it a conventional wisdom that if you people, and I've seen a lot of people arguing very passionately that minimum wage is also bad for workers. Right. They say that if you can you explain what was taught to you in a typical B school? What is taught about the impact of minimum wages?
Yes. So in B school we draw this supply demand curve. So higher wage, then more number of workers are willing to work. So that is supply function. And higher the wage, then firms are not willing to hire more number of workers. That is the demand function. And intersection would be the equilibrium price. And if you are paying a price that is higher than the market wage, then firms would hire less.
Okay, so
that leads to higher unemployment.
Okay, let's give a simple example. So let's say a firm has to sell in a market price of something is 300 rupees. Right? Some output, whatever. You make a toy or something, and you used to pay 200 rupees for a worker to make this toy. Now the government says you have to pay, this is how it is taught, right?
Right.
Government says now you have to pay 350 rupees, whereas the output price is 300 rupees, right? Now I can't sell something at 300 by paying a wage of 350 as an entrepreneur. So what will I do? I will not produce. I will shut down. So conventionally it is taught to, now I'm the business school professor, unfortunately. So we teach that minimum wages sometimes can lead to lower employment. Right. This is what we teach. Right. So that is why a lot of people do not like this minimum wage. So and under your assumption it makes sense. Right. But have you thought, is this universal truth, or circumstances it may not work?
Yeah. So interestingly, there is a paper published on this topic by Card and Kruger. In fact, they got Nobel Prize recently. So what they do is New Jersey. The study is based in US. New Jersey introduced minimum wage.
Just hold on. So you are now going to describe a paper.
Yes.
Which actually shows that minimum wage is not. Minimum wage may not lead to reduction in employment.
Right.
That is what you are going to show, right?
Broadly, yes.
Broadly, yes. So otherwise, conventional wisdom is if you impose a minimum wage, it will lead to lower employment, because I can't tell the customer that I have to pay more wages, so you pay more for the toy. Customer has a ability to pay or willingness to pay for the toy. He or she will pay only so much. So then eventually what will happen is worker will be unemployed. This is what it is. So now what is the New Jersey episode, and you explain, and then I can explain the economics of it.
Yeah. So puzzle is this: New Jersey increased the minimum wage for workers in fast food restaurants, and the neighboring state Pennsylvania did not.
This is like the Ayushman Bharat paper that we discussed.
Yes.
Aditya was there, you were not there. So we were talking about Telangana did it, Karnataka did not, and so on. Carry on.
Right. So since New Jersey increased minimum wages, then the expectation, if you go by MBA concept, then there should be higher unemployment in New Jersey compared to Pennsylvania. But they find that there is no difference in employment between two states. So this is like a puzzle. Why is there no unemployment in case of New Jersey?
Right. So there is a simple explanation, right? The non-binding part. Can you explain that simpler explanation? So
right. So non-binding could be, you were giving the example of market wage being 300, let's say. If minimum wage is 200 rupees, then firm is already paying more than 200 rupees.
So one simple explanation is, what if this minimum wage is lower than what the firm is already paying? If it is lower than firm is already paying, then it makes no difference, because anyway market is forcing people to pay this much, and government is enforcing something much lower than that.
Right.
But that is not such a very interesting. People don't have to listen to us for it.
Right.
There's another very interesting reason for where minimum wage can actually increase employment, not decrease employment.
Okay.
This happens in a very. Let me give you a very simple example. So think about it. You are a entrepreneur and you are going to hire some workers. Okay, so again, let's say you make toys. I don't know why toy, you can make anything you want. Let's say you make toys. Let's say the price at which you sell your toy, because it's market driven, is let's say 350 rupees.
Right.
So you sell your toy at 350 rupees. Now, and there you don't have a control. It's a market price. You can't decide the price, there's competition. But where you have control is on workers. You have this, workers do not have bargaining power with you as much, right?
Okay.
They are not free to move between your firm and my firm, and imagine it's some village where you're doing it. If you fire them, it's not that they can go. Now, consider a situation. If you hire one worker, if you just decide to hire one worker, it's enough if you pay 100 rupees.
Okay.
Because there is someone who is desperately wanting to work, and they will come and work for you, even at 100 rupees, let's say. But if you want to hire two, then you have to pay both of them 150.
Okay.
The reason is the second guy is not as desperate.
Right.
And you can't discriminate. That is not possible.
Right.
You can't pay one for the same work, 150 for one and 100 for one. That leads to, that person will not work also.
Right.
So second guy, if you want to hire, you have to pay 150 to both. Imagine, just take it further. To hire third person, let's say you have to pay 200 for all three. Right? Now fourth, 250 to 4 people. Fifth, similarly, let's say you have to pay 300 rupees. Right? Is the idea clear?
Yes, yes.
So you're going to a village and you're looking for workers. There's an output which you can sell at 350 rupees. And you now have to decide how many workers you want to employ. And let's make another assumption that each worker will produce 1 unit.
Okay.
If you hire this person, you will be able to make 1 unit in a day, in a month, week, whatever. Does not matter. Right? So I hope the setup is clear.
Yes. So the price is determined by markets.
The output price.
Yes, the final price.
Yes.
The firm has control over inputs.
Input labor. Price. Because the assumption we're making is these workers don't have bargaining power.
Okay.
So if I they just can't leave me and go somewhere else.
Okay.
Like your factories, in a situation where imagine an industrial town where this won't work. If I don't give them, you will give them. But imagine some remote area, some specialized job, there is only one factory which does it, or some few factories which have polluted. These things can happen. In such a case, I have a control over wages. Okay. Otherwise, let's say in ISB, if you're hiring ISB faculty, you have to give market wage. Otherwise, they'll go somewhere else.
Right.
Right? There it does not apply. But it applies. PhD students, it applies. We can pay you, don't pay you anything. Where will you go? You are in that situation now.
Right.
Having spent 2 years, suppose we reduce your stipend by 25%. What will you do? You will just, crib and
yes.
and curse and do all of that. But that's all you can do, right? So now let's come back to this example. So what the setup is, look, I can sell my output at 350, and there are workers out there. There are, let's say, 5 people. The first guy is willing to work at 100. If I hire only one person, I can just pay 100 rupee wage, hire the guy, rest will remain unemployed. But if I have to pay 2, the second guy is not willing to work at 100. He wants 150. He or she wants 150 because not that desperate. But then if I want to hire 2 people, I have to pay 150 to both. Right. I can't have a factory where 2 people are doing the same job. One I pay 150 and another I pay 100. That's called price discrimination. Let's assume that's not possible. Right. And so much blatant you can't do. They will talk to each other and all that, right, and so on. Right. Now I leave it to you. Let's do the calculation. Your IIT, JEE, and you cracked all kinds of exam, and this will require only whatever% of your that ability. So if I take one worker, then what will be my profit? Can you just take viewers through how to calculate this?
Yeah. So profit,
and assume wage is the only thing I pay.
Right.
Nothing else. Right. Just for simplicity. There's no electricity bill and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So profit would be, we would compute for one worker times the number of workers. Yeah. So if there is only one worker, then profit would be 350 minus 100 rupees.
Yeah, because one worker will produce one output. One unit of output. One toy, whatever. Yes. One bat, ball, whatever.
Right.
So you will be able to sell at 350. You pay 100.
Right.
Profit is 250.
250.
What if you hire 2?
2 workers, so it would be 350 minus 150, which is 200 into 2. 400 units would be the profit.
Yeah. So this is you can't simplify. This is a problem. So let's go slowly. So you will sell 2 units of output because 2 workers will produce 2 units of output. So 2 units of output, selling price is 700. Right. So we have said, look, on the output market you don't have a control. You change your output doesn't change the price. You are not such a big player.
Right.
That you change output, market price will change. Okay. So whether you produce 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, market price will be 350. So you produce 2. So your revenue is going to be 700.
700.
What is going to be your cost?
300.
300, because 150 is the wage. You have to pay 150 to both. This is a crucial assumption. So now profit is how much?
300
700
units.
minus 300, which is 400.
400 units.
400. So 400 rupees, let's say. So when you made first unit, your profit was 350 minus 100,
250.
which is 250. Now it has become 400.
400.
Okay. So now let's do 3. So just for those viewers who missed this, can you go through this slowly once again? How many units we produce? What's the revenue? What's the cost, and so on?
Yeah. So there are 3 units.
Right.
And for each unit, we are getting the firm is getting 350 rupees.
Yes.
So total selling price would be 1050 rupees.
Yes.
And cost would be 200 times 3.
Yeah,
which is
wage now
600.
is going to be 200 because
Yes.
you have to hire the third worker, and once I hire the third worker at 200, I have to pay 200 to all 3.
Right.
Right.
So total cost would be 600 rupees.
Yeah.
And the profit would be 1050 minus 600, 450 rupees.
450. So far so good, right?
Yes.
I moved from a profit of 200 to 250 to 400 to 450, right?
Yes.
But do you notice, and your calculus mind must be already active, right?
Yeah. So the growth is
Growth is
decreasing.
going down, second order,
Yes.
and all of that you must
Yes.
have done. But we will not bother viewers with all of that, right?
Right.
Now let's do one more.
Okay.
What if you hire 4 workers?
4 workers.
Right.
Okay.
So let's do the same thing.
Yes. So 350 into 4,
Yeah.
that would be
So
1400.
4 workers will produce 4 units.
4
that
units.
assumption will. So that will be what? 1400?
1400.
Right.
And price would be 250. Total cost would be 250 times 4, 1000 rupees.
1000 rupees,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So 1000 rupees is your cost. Selling price is 1400. So what's your profit?
400.
400. Now, are you better off hiring 4 or better off hiring 3?
3.
So what will you do? If you have power to decide,
Yes.
how many you will hire?
I'll stop at 3 workers.
You will stop at 3 workers.
Right.
You will stop at 3 workers. So if you have power over workers, so you are a buyer of workers. Do you see? You are demanding. Usually we are used to seeing firms as sellers.
Right.
Right? Here is a case where firm is a buyer,
Right.
not a seller.
Right.
Firm is demanding. Supplier is the worker. Right? So this is called monopsony. When buyer has power.
Okay.
I'm sure all of people must have heard about monopoly.
Monopoly,
right?
yes.
Monopoly is when seller has power.
Right.
This is monopsony, where buyer has power. It's not absolute. I'm oversimplifying a little bit because in an absolute monopsony something else will happen.
Right.
But this is monopsony.
Right.
So the buyer can decide where to stop. It's not the market which is deciding. See, output, this guy does not have any control.
Yes.
But the person can output price. The buyer can decide, I will stop at 3 workers, right?
Right.
Now let's do a thought experiment. The new laws are implemented, right? So if these minimum wages were not there, what will be the outcome? 3 workers would be hired and wage would be what? 150, 200 rupees.
200 rupees.
That's
Yes.
the optimum,
Yes.
right? 200 wage, so 600 cost, 1050 revenue,
Right. Right.
Now let's say government comes and says minimum wage has to be 250.
Okay.
So your whatever you learned would suggest that firm will hire less workers
Right.
because they were paying 200. Now the government is asking to pay 250, and they will not hire as much. You will
Right.
say it's not affordable and all that.
Right.
Let's
Right.
see. Right. Now what will the firm do? If the government says you have to pay 250, otherwise this is illegal
For all.
for all. If you want to hire anyone, you have to pay 250, except PhD students. Don't have any
PhD
jobs.
below minimum wage.
PhD students are not human beings, that's the sad part, right? No law on earth, except maybe right to life, and I think they cannot be killed or
Living wage.
yeah, living wage, and I think they cannot be killed or something, those kind of things. Other than that, PhD students have no rights. That's why you are sitting here at 10:30 and doing all this, right? So let's do this again. So now the government says you have to pay 250. Okay. Now think you are the entrepreneur doing this. Now you will come and redo this calculation. Look, I am producing I'm hiring 3 workers, and my revenue from 3 workers remains 1050, but my cost now is 750
Right.
because I have to pay 250.
Right.
So what will be my profit?
So
1057, 300 rupees, right?
Yes.
Now, what if I hire 4 workers?
Hmm.
Now, don't go by the earlier schedule, that is gone,
Right.
right? So, what if I hire 4 workers?
Hmm.
So, now I will pay wage for 4 workers. What's the wage? Market wage 250.
Right.
Normally, even if this minimum wage, what the four workers would have come at 250,
250.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Revenue is going to be what?
350 into 4, 1400.
1400.
Hmm.
And cost?
Cost would be
250 into 4?
into 4000.
1000.
Yeah.
Profit?
400 units.
From 300 to 400.
Right.
I will hire more, not less in this case.
Right.
Do you get this thing?
Yes.
Look, earlier what used to happen? I could hire 3 people and pay each of them 200 rupees.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
That is why I decided to hire 3.
Right.
In that case, it was better to hire 3 than 4. Because to hire the 4th guy, I had to pay 250 to all.
Right.
That would have increased my cost by 200 rupees. Right? So that is why it became less profitable. From a profit of 450, it fell to 400. Because I'm going to make 350 more. But my cost will go to, this is called poisoning effect. Poisoning effect is to hire one more person, you have to pay 50 rupees more to everybody.
Right.
Is the point clear?
Right. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So earlier, hiring 3 people, you would pay 600 rupees. Hiring
Right.
4 people, 250 into 4, 1000 rupees. Each one will get more.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So now it is not like that. For hiring 3 people, you will anyway have to pay 750 rupees.
Right.
You are not making 450.
Right.
You are making 300. Right?
Yes.
So now might as well hire the 4th guy.
4th guy.
Earlier, if you had hired the 4th guy, your wage would have gone up by 600 to 1400 rupees. Your revenue would have gone up only by 350 rupees, and you would have lost 50 rupees.
Right.
Now, if you hire the 4th guy, your wage bill will go up only by 250 rupees. Why? Because you anyway have to pay 750.
Right.
Wage bill will go up by 250, right? Which will make it 1000. Revenue will go up by 350. You will actually gain 100. And anyone, I advise the viewers to just pause it and, if these are not very complicated, right?
Right.
You just do these numbers. But it's a very important, because a lot of times, that's why I said, just because we are in the business school, we are not anti-worker or anything. We are in the business of understanding. We don't have any fixed views on anything, right? We have some methodology of assessing, and this is more like diagnosis and figure out what's the solution. So you can't say a blanket statement that minimum wage will lead to lower employment. In this case, minimum wage can lead to higher employment.
Right.
So in that paper, New Jersey paper that you said, is a case where minimum wage did not lead to lower employment. That is not very exciting. That is also possible. That's a case where government is asking firms to pay a minimum wage which is lower than what they are anyway paying.
Possible.
Then it does not make any difference. Right. I am anyway paying 300. You asked me to pay 200. So what? In this case, in the earlier case, firms were paying 200. If the government says minimum wage is 100, it will make no difference.
Right.
But I am saying, because of minimum wage, you are forced to increase wages. Even then, you can hire more. Right? So so that's what I'm saying. The newspaper types who come and just speak ideologically, you have to be very careful. There is no universal law that minimum wage will lead to higher minimum wage will lead to lower unemployment. So there is no universal law. So you have to understand, and especially in the Indian kind of setup where firms are likely to have higher bargaining power than workers, and I don't think this idea of living wage, if you provide minimum what is required, unless, of course, in our case, what if the wage was taken to be 500 rupees? Again, we are not talking ideologically. We are not saying any amount of minimum wage is good.
Right.
In the same example, just take it to extreme. Government says minimum wage 500. You will not hire anyone.
Right.
Straightforward.
Right.
Right. There is no point in hiring.
Yes.
Right. There is no way who will lose. Of course. And that I have cooked up the example. Correct.
Right.
The point is, we are not very sure that this living wage concept is going to be bad. Right. So whereas the first amendment of pushing the worker labor law applicability from 100 to 300 seems to be good. That's what the evidence says. Minimum wage, we have to see where it's going to fit
So there is a sweet spot.
Yes.
In that range, there is going to be higher employment. But if we go even further,
Yes.
then that may lead to decline in
Yes.
employment.
So the another way is places where workers already have very high bargaining power. Market for workers is very, very competitive. You know, in those places, you know, if you increase wages beyond what is there, that will lead to lower employment.
Right.
Places where workers don't have that bargaining power, you know, already, because firms have some power. There you force them to increase minimum wage, that may actually increase employment up to a point, this sweet spot business.
Right.
So it is not very clear. One thing the government should know when they implement this policy, this can have heterogeneous impact. You know, in some industries this may lead to a reduction in employment.
Right.
Some industries it may lead to increase in employment. So if you actually sit and it's not very hard to analyze which industries firms have power, which industries workers have power. So you should be prepared for some kind of reallocation of workers from one type of industry to another. And that may require retraining, reskilling and all of that. You know, so it's not a blanket bad thing. A minimum wage idea. So that way, the idea of giving a living wage to workers, if it is arrived at reasonably, I think is a good one. And it's also indexing it. You know, one more thing that I would recommend there should be some indexing of it. Otherwise, it makes no sense. In a country, you know, we and this we have in the US now. Fortunately, fortunate is not the right word for us. I'm saying from our point of view, because there is inflation, people understand there. Otherwise, those employers who have given salaries in the US, they are used to this 2% increase and all that. Here, inflation on an average is 5-6%.
Right.
So this thing should be indexed to inflation as well.
Right.
So that should be indexed to inflation, and then the government should see what's the heterogeneous impact.
Right.
So there is it's not as straightforward as the first aspect that we discussed, right? So I hope this point is clear. Right?
Yes.
Now let's move on. You have also looked at, there are some papers which our faculty have done. You know, Professor Krishnamurthy Subramanian, who is now at the IMF, Professor Shashwat Alok has papers, where they are showing some kind of employees, there could be some issues if you implement harsh labor laws.
Yes.
You know, in fact, giving, sorry, it's reverse. If you give workers some power, it may actually help. That is what they're showing, right?
Right.
So can you explain some their findings?
Yes. So we'll touch upon two papers. So first is by Professor Viril Acharya and Professor Subbu. They look at, so broadly the
This
point
is in the Review of Financial Studies?
Yeah,
another
RFS
talk.
in 2014,
Right.
published in 2014.
Right.
So idea is that let's say I work for tech company, I work in R&D division. Suppose I work hard and come up with new technology that could be patented. And suppose the patent is on my name and also my company's name.
Right.
So just before filing the patent, the company could be opportunistic and dismiss me from the company.
Right.
So in that case, the patent would go for company, right?
Right.
So I'm losing in this case.
Right.
What US government said is that you cannot have this kind of dismissal in bad faith. That is what several states have passed these laws.
Right.
Professor Subbu and Acharya, what they find is that after the passage of these laws, innovation increased.
Okay. So employees who are very innovative, research oriented, if you
Right.
give them some stability of tenure,
Right.
they are likely to do well. Is
Right.
that so? Are we saying that people like us who do research should be given protection?
Without pressure.
That is asking for too much. But no, that's what they find. And what about the other paper?
Yeah, other paper by Professor Shashwat and Professor Subbu. Again, the paper is based in
Shashwat Alok is a colleague of ours.
Right.
At ISB.
Again, the setting is based in US.
Right.
Again, they also find that giving property rights to employees, that leads to innovation, higher innovation and higher entrepreneurship.
And it leads to innovation outside the company limits as well, right?
Yes.
So that's a very nice finding they have.
Right.
So like general innovation.
Right.
I think that's something new about this paper.
Yes. So if employees are doing on their own,
Right.
that is also good, right?
Yeah.
If they're doing something
So
creative.
moonlighting is not always bad if it leads to some innovative stuff.
Right.
So for the society as a whole, this benefits.
Yes.
So if you give more employment protection to researcher type, innovative type people, that actually helps.
Yes.
That is not as bad as giving to everyone.
Right.
So
Right.
of course some people may harp on it, inequality and all that. But then if you want to do research by design is risky.
Right.
Because the person who is doing a research job is like an entrepreneur. We see rejections every every week. We have some rejection or the other when you submit papers. So in that case, there is it makes sense to have some kind of employment protection.
Right.
And that's what these papers talk about, right?
Yes.
But all in all, what's your view on and there's one more, we forgot our own paper, right? In this law. So we have a paper which is published in the GD with Nitin Manil as a co-author. Now, as you know, what we're talking about there is, what firms have done to sort of circumvent this employment laws is hiring contract workers. Right? How do they? Can you explain that phenomena? And it comes from this Bertrand and paper from others.
Yes.
Ritam and Ritam Chore and all of them have shown this.
Right. So this phenomena started after one judgment by Supreme Court.
Right.
And since 2000 onwards, the share of contract workers in manufacturing increased by from 20% to almost 40%. It doubled.
So if you make labor laws very stringent, what
Yes.
the firms have done is they just hire contract workers.
Yes.
And these contract workers are not on their roles, right?
You're not directly on the firm's payroll. There is a staffing company which provides these contract workers. So technically, these contract workers are on payroll of that staffing firm.
Yeah. So which is your housekeeping and all of that. And
Yes.
then the case is about that firm started using these workers for their core operations also.
Core operations.
Right? That was the issue.
Yes.
Now, can you tell the viewers what do we find about the nature of wages of these people?
Yeah, so core operations, what the judgment did is that suppose a state government says that this is illegal. Earlier there was this dilemma whether to absorb those workers into the regular workforce or dismiss them. So whenever there is uncertainty, firms are hesitant, right?
Right.
As a result, they were not going for contract workers in the first place. What Supreme Court made it clear is that state government can still intervene, but after intervention, the employer is not bound to absorb these contract workers into the workforce.
Okay, so if a contract worker has to be dismissed,
Yes.
then they don't have to be again taken back
As permanent workers.
as permanent workers,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So now we use that event, we use that shock to study the responsiveness contract workers' wages.
Yes.
And one main result that we document is that firms have one advantage of having contract workers.
Right.
Their wages are flexible. If you face a shock, it could be any kind of shock. It can be weather shock, it could be interest rates going up.
Right.
The advantage of having contract workers, although it's so counterintuitive, right? If before doing the paper, what were we thinking? We were thinking benefit of having contract workers is you can fire them. It is not just that. You don't need to fire them. You can change their wages. In fact, in good times their wages goes up more. In bad times their wages goes down. This is what we find.
Right.
Now, in this labor laws, because now you are going to move to fixed term contract, we don't know how their wages are going to behave.
Right.
So that may impact firms' ability to react to shocks. So right now, many firms which are under stringent labor laws are able to absorb shocks because these wages are very flexible.
Right.
Now, we don't know when we move to this new labor laws and have this fixed term, that's another amendment, right?
Right.
You're going to have workers for a fixed term. We discussed this last episode.
Right.
You can have workers for 2 years, whatever number of years, and after that you can let them go.
Right.
So there's no need to fire or anything, and nobody's permission is required.
Right.
The only problem is, right now, because this person is going to be in your firm, how this person, what will be the expectation on wages? Can you keep increasing and decreasing at your will?
Right.
If you cannot, then firm's ability to absorb shocks may go down. That is one concern that our paper flags on the labor laws. Sometimes if there is a shock, then these wages remain rigid, then there is a problem. That's the finding from our paper.
Right.
But there is advantage also, right? Having people inside your firm than contract.
Yes.
Don't you think they will assimilate better into the firm and all that? So that aspect we have to see.
Yeah, but still, if they are on short-term basis, whether they are able to build up those skills or not, if they move on after 1 or 2 years, again, it's like contract worker. So we have to see how this process evolves.
Sure. So it's not blanket that every firm and everywhere it will benefit.
Right.
But on an average, do you think this is a step in the right direction, this changing labor laws, all of these provisions?
Yes, I think at the end of the day, companies are having additional flexibility and firms are going to optimize.
Yeah, I think
That
all in
leads
all,
to-
it should lead to higher employment.
Yes.
Maybe there will be some winners and some losers. That's a part of life.
Yes.
And that is why retraining, reskilling, identify areas where this can create trouble. You know, we said minimum wages can create trouble if wage market is competitive, and maybe you need move worker from one place to another. So if these policies are and it may impact ability to absorb shocks, like our paper shows, these things are possible. But if checks and balances and offsetting measures like skilling and all of that are implemented, I think this will be this is a right step in the right direction, and also answer that problem that why the Atmanirbhar thing that we're talking about.
Right.
This can really fuel it, because this will lead to more employment and more formal employment. So you have anything to add at the end? Or happy that your ordeal is over, you can go back and do your work?
I think the minimum wage point is very important. I mean, even after studying MBA, the concept of minimum wage, how it could have distributional effects is not clear.
Right.
I think that is something which government has to focus on, where this redistribution is going to happen between firms and employees.
And don't listen to this ideological type people who will say, there are, you know, if you're on the left, you will say always minimum wage is good. If you're on the right, you will say, oh no, minimum wage is distortionary and all.
Right.
So when people on the right say minimum wage is distortionary, they're assuming markets are working well. And we know markets always don't work well. Right. And this is people from finance are saying.
Yeah.
So if we are not, by any measure, we are not left or anything, right?
Yeah.
So it's better to, you know, we should operate like any other, I know we are social scientists, but we should operate like any other scientist does. Look at the situation and then decide what is right and what is wrong. But overall, we think it's a labor law reforms are a measure in the right direction, and hopefully in the first 100 days, these things get implemented. Right. Thank you, Rajas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.